When you're first starting out as a researcher in a field that's new to you, it's a little bit like traveling to a foreign country. Everyone speaks a different language that's filled with all kinds of discipline-specific jargon, and it seems that facts about life in the research community are simply known, but never quite articulated. People simply know which researchers are influential in doing the most innovative work. They know which journals and conferences are the most prestigious, and they are able to read highly technical articles that might be difficult for a beginner to really wrap their head around. Basically, longtime researchers know the social and intellectual landscape of their research community, and as a newcomer, it's your job to be a sponge, to keep your eyes and your ears open, to absorb, and to do lots and lots and lots of reading in the field. It can be tough to identify the most useful and relevant and beginner-friendly articles related to a particular research topic, but in this video, I'm going to walk you through some strategies for doing just that. I can almost guarantee that you will have to read more than you will end up using, and that's because research is very much an iterative process without a ready answer. But this effort is really important because it's how you begin to really understand not only an area of research, but also the community that you're becoming a part of. As a starting place, I recommend your library catalog and any full-text databases that you have access to, and that's because the library owns or licenses the materials available through these resources, so you'll have easy access to articles and books that you find through them. You can also, of course, use other resources like Google Scholar, but just remember that you might need to leave extra time to request articles and books not immediately available through your library. As you start to find articles and you start to sift through them, it's important to keep a few things in mind. First of all, what are the author's credentials and what is their motive? For instance, who paid for their research and what is it that they may or may not have wanted to get out of it? Also, who published the material? Is it something you found in the popular press, like the New York Times, or is it from an academic journal? And that leads into the next point. Who reviewed it? If it's in a peer-reviewed journal, that means other scholars have read the article and vetted it. But if it's not, then we're not so sure whether the research community has put their stamp of approval on the work. Also, it's important to think about what kinds of research the resource represents. Is it a literature review that's looking to synthesize the work of others? Is it a research article reporting on a new study? Or is it a theoretical article presenting a new idea? Also, who is the intended audience? Is it for fellow scholars that work within a very specific subdiscipline? Is it for a broader academic audience, or is it for an even broader public audience? At the beginning of your research process, you'll sometimes want to aim for peer-reviewed articles that are written for a somewhat broader academic audience, and that's because these articles sometimes have less jargon, and so they're a little bit easier to understand. And they're also sometimes among the more influential articles since they appeal to a broader group of researchers. As you're reading, it's also important to think about how what you just read relates not only to your research interest or question, but also to other things you've read so far. And that's because as you read, the goal is really to build more knowledge about your topic by synthesizing and making connections among the many different articles and resources that you're learning from. So let's say that you found a few articles that are related to your research question, but for whatever reason, they're just not quite what you're looking for. You may have found them through a database search, or maybe it's a paper written by a potential mentor. As an example, I'm interested in bilingualism and the brain. I live in Durham, and since I'm looking for a local mentor, I looked around online and found out about Edna Andrews, a linguistics scholar at Duke. According to her faculty profile page, this right here is her most recent article. It might be a little too specific at this point, and I can see that it has some jargon here and there. But instead of writing it off, I'm going to take this paper and work backwards to find related papers that might be more useful to me right now as I'm just beginning my research. Basically, a paper like this might not be what I need right now, but it can still be a useful tool in my search, and I want to read it strategically in order to find hints that will point me toward other articles that might be a better starting place, or that might be especially influential in the field. So I'm going to be on the lookout for a few different sections: the introduction, the literature review, the discussion, and the reference list. And within these sections, what I'm looking for are the articles that the author or authors have referenced and a sense of what they are about. So if we look back to the article that I found and scan the introduction for citations, there don't seem to be any. And I'm also not seeing a section called the literature review, but this section here, results from previous studies, looks promising, and I'm actually starting to see lots of citations here. And if I keep skimming, this line right here jumps out as a bit of a gold mine. So this is a section that I would read more carefully as I look for articles related to my topic. And as I do that, I would be referring to the reference list for more information about these articles as I go. When I continue skimming, I find a section titled Discussion, and so I'd read this section more carefully too, looking for other potentially useful articles. And then finally, I'd take a careful look at the references at the end of the paper. And as you read more and more articles, you might start to notice some patterns. For instance, do certain journals appear regularly on the reference lists? What about certain authors? You might even notice the same few articles being cited over and over again, and these are all potential leads on influential journals, researchers, and articles, so be sure to follow up on them. As I've already mentioned, sometimes it's good to start with peer-reviewed articles written for a broader academic audience because these are often among the more influential in a particular field, and they're sometimes filled with less jargon since it's meant for an audience that extends beyond your very specific research area. One way to track down influential journal articles on your topic is to first figure out which journals in your field are well-known and highly respected, and there are a few ways to do this. First, you can simply use Google or another search engine of your choice and look for high-impact journals in your discipline or top journals in your discipline. In this example, I've searched for the top journals in history, and you can see that I've gotten a few results that look relevant. For now, though, I'm going to go ahead and click on this first one. It's on the Times Higher Education website, which is a good sign since they are a reputable source when it comes to higher education. And this is where I end up. It's a list of the top 20 journals in history, and as someone familiar with the field, these look about right to me, but if you weren't sure, this is a great question to ask a teacher or mentor. It's also worth pointing out that while this is a list of top history journals, you'll notice that the top result is a journal that focuses on American history, the second is one that focuses on environmental history, and the third is another American history journal. A bit further down, we start to see some journals devoted to African history and British studies, social history, the history of sexuality, etc. And these, of course, represent different subfields of historical study, and so depending on the field, it's important to not just pay attention to the top journals overall, but to seek out the ones that are relevant to your topic. Another way to identify influential journals is by using Google Scholar. To do this, along the top of the homepage, click on Metrics. You'll be brought to a list of high-impact journals or top publications by language. On the left, you'll see some very broad areas of research, and if you click on one of these, you'll end up at a list of high-impact journals within that field. From there, on the left, you can drill down even deeper into subcategories or subdisciplines. So from health and medical sciences, clicking on any of these areas of research will bring you to a list of top journals in that particular subdiscipline. But when you're looking at top journals, it's important to take both a broad and narrow view, and this is because the most influential articles in your subdiscipline might actually be published in the top journals for your discipline more broadly. These articles might also be easier for someone new to the field to understand, and that's because they're written for a broader academic audience and they will probably have a bit less jargon. One way to gauge the relative influence of a journal article is by looking at citation counts, which tells you the number of times an article has been cited. You might choose to look at citation counts while you do your research, or after you've found a batch of articles and you're looking to figure out which ones have had the largest influence. Some databases, like ProQuest, will include citation counts in the search results, so these can be a helpful guide as you are collecting potentially useful articles. However, these counts only include articles that are also available in that particular database, so they are not really comprehensive or even necessarily accurate for comparison purposes. Google Scholar is generally a better resource when it comes to citation counts because it has indexed way more articles than the individual databases you might search for full-text articles, and it also includes citations for plenty of books and conference proceedings. From the Google Scholar homepage, I'm going to search for an article that I've already read because I'm interested in seeing whether it's had an impact, and here are the results. And this one here is the one that I'm looking for, The Long Civil Rights Movement and the Political Uses of the Past by Jacqueline Dowd Hall. I notice here that it was published in the Journal of American History, which you might remember was one of the top history journals according to the Times Higher Education. Down here, it tells me that this article has been cited by 361 other sources indexed by Google Scholar, and when I click on that link, I actually see a list of all 361 sources that have cited the Hall article. As a raw number, 361 doesn't tell me all too much. I happen to know that this is a pretty good number of citations for a history article that's 10 years old, but in the sciences, this wouldn't be a particularly impressive number. One way to get a sense of what the citation count number really means in your context is to browse citation counts for other resources related to your research topic, and the best way to do this is to save relevant articles to your Google Scholar library. So this is my library with all of the citations that I've saved. Google Scholar allows you to label your articles, and my labels are listed over here on the left. Labels are especially helpful if you're working on a number of different research projects and want to be able to group citations accordingly. Since I'm trying to get a sense of whether 361 citations is a lot for an article published 10 years ago about the civil rights movement, I'm going to select my label, Civil Rights. Now we can see all of the citations about civil rights that I've saved to my Google Scholar library. If we browse the list, there are a few resources that have more citations than Hall's article, but they were also published more than 10 years before it, which is important to keep in mind because they've had more time to be cited. With that in mind, I would say that it looks like Hall's article is well cited when it comes to the history of the civil rights movement, and that it is more than likely that it's been influential in the field. So citation counts aren't especially precise, but when compared to citation counts for other peer-reviewed scholarly publications in your area of research, they can give you a general sense of things. And finally, when it comes to finding articles that are a good starting place, people are often your absolute best resource. So once you have one, definitely ask your mentor which articles you should be reading. They'll be able to point you to key papers on your topic, and while these papers may be too narrow or too technical to serve as a good starting place, they will likely be good stepping stones to other resources. Your teachers are also a great resource. Even if they're not specialists in your particular topic, they may be able to point you in the right direction when it comes to high-impact journals or influential scholars in the field. And of course, librarians can help you use the tips I've just discussed to track down influential research articles that will serve as a good starting place. Librarians can also help you track down books and articles that aren't immediately available to you by using interlibrary loan, so always ask.